people don't buy the product, people buy the person, they buy the story. So if you're building out your multifamily strategy, or if you're building out any product strategy, it's about the person that is creating it and the journey that they can bring people on. This is for B2B, this could be for B2C. The reason why I know this to be true is because all the things that you don't think are good is what people cling on to. So the saying I like to say with this is that your rough edges allows people to cling on to something with you. So if you're too polished and too basically trying to be perfect, that actually deters people. If you look at even some of the biggest names in real estate, they just share a lot of their own personal stories a lot of the time. And they actually bring in aspects of their life. And as a result, that's what builds the strong brand. Now, it is non-negotiable that you need to be excellent at what you do.
I'm Reid, CEO and co-founder at Digible. And today, I don't want to overhype this or get too excited, but we have a very special guest. This is the Quincy Jones of podcast, the modern Quincy Jones. Darren, who helped really level up our podcast. I think it's been maybe 3 years now that we've been working with you, Darren. But yeah, he's one of the more interesting and obviously more attractive. He's been growing out his hair. He looks like he's on Point Break, except the Irish or Ireland version of that. I'm trying to do everything I can to hype you and embarrass you at the same time, but you also look like you've been hitting the gym. So yeah, Darren, we are very pumped to hear you talk about podcasting, about Digible Dudes a little bit. And any advice, tips, because I think you clearly have established yourself as a thought leader as it comes to brand development. You were just mentioning like how you can get the marketing, do the heavy lifting, when it comes to sales acquisition, all that stuff. So I think there's plenty of value there, like just in how you've built your company that you can impart on to some of our listeners. And I'm sure the conversation will go a few other directions
100%.
as well. But yeah, welcome aboard, man.
Yeah, man, big thank you. And I think what's interesting here is you probably know me as like from podcasting, but all of the lessons from creating content is all to do with how you get clients, how you grow your brand. So anyone who's listening who wants to get more clients for their business, this is going to be valuable. And I think that was a big evolution for me when we first started working together, which was, almost 3 years ago, as you mentioned. And it was, how do you use content to get more clients for your business? And it could be a Digible Dudes who's a huge company, or it could be a very small multifamily business, but it's the same principles. It's attention, it's psychology, it's working closely with people that you want to work with. And it's also showing your values. That's the biggest thing for me is, what I love about you guys is that you're just kind of yourself. And that's something that I never wanted to change in the content. It's if you guys have your own quirky, weird edges, that's what people buy. That's what people fall in love with. And that was a big evolution for myself over the past almost half a decade. So that will be super valuable for people. And then how that actually helps you actually grow your business, which is ultimately what a lot of people want to learn as well in here.
Yeah, no, great stuff. I think to dive right in, since you teed it up on the value that you could get out of this, regardless of the type of business, but how maybe multifamily, and I'll say marketer specifically, but I think as well as anybody, we have listeners that kind of go across a broader spectrum there, but most of them are within real estate. So we have investors, owners, operators, and quite a few marketers that now tune in. And one of the challenges, I mean, it's a huge challenge, frankly, in this industry, is building a brand because I'll say how crowded, saturated in some markets, the apartment living has become. And so, in some ways, it feels like you're seeing the same brand over and over, just with a different name on it. When you look at the property, and even to a degree, I think some of these property management companies. And so I think in my multifamily marketing principles, I said, don't let go, don't give up of trying to establish your brand and create those differentiators. But you really need to have, I think, a crisp kind of formula or approach to that. Because if you go at it, I'll say just too generally, you're probably not going to get very far, be very effective. So I'm not asking you as an expert of multifamily marketing exactly how you would approach that. But since you said you have some kind of best practices, some tactics that you think are applicable to just about any brand, how would you approach, and now I will give you somewhat of the challenge that faces these marketers and these owners, is when 20 new Class A beautiful buildings are opening up in downtown Denver, how would you go about trying to carve out an identity or a unique brand
Yeah.
with such similarities?
So the way that I always look at this is that it's people don't buy the product, people buy the person. They buy the story. So if you're building out your multifamily strategy or if you're building out any product strategy, it's about the person that is creating it and the journey that they can bring people on. This is for B2B, this could be for B2C. The reason why I know this to be true is because look at some of the biggest names in just like global business. They carved their own brand within there that gave them their kind of edge, gave them their uniqueness, and that's what people cling on to. You know, whether you like some of the big names or not in the industry, like let's say if you look at like a Tesla, even if you looked at like Tim Cook, Steve Jobs back in the day, when he was coming out with products, yes, it was new, unique, novel, 100%. But they liked his kind of weird quirkiness. And I think what's interesting is when you were younger, you were probably slapped on the wrist for having like a weird take on things in school, like as a kid. But as you're older, that becomes your unique point of differentiation in the market. This is the unique thing that all the things that you don't think are good is what people cling on to. So the saying I like to say with this is that your rough edges allows people to cling on to something with you. So if you're too polished and too basically trying to be perfect, that actually deters people. So the scenario with my story is that before I was 23, I had three failed businesses. I run an events company, I ran an e-commerce company, and I ran a tech startup before I was 23. I tell that story because it's valuable for other people, whether they're old, young, and they're like, oh, this guy's normal. He's not a robot. And that's valuable because if I'm trying to pull people along into what I'm doing, into my world, they get attracted to it. So if you look at even some of the biggest names in real estate, they just share a lot of their own personal stories a lot of the time. And they actually bring in aspects of their life. And as a result, that's what builds the strong brand. Now, it is non negotiable that you need to be excellent at what you do. So if you're selling a multifamily story building down the middle of Denver, of course, there needs to be everything in place, everything needs to be perfect in terms of the property. But there comes a point whereby competency actually has a cap. So I think a lot of people, when they're creating content online, they try to become extremely competent at what they're doing. But the funny thing is competency has like a limiter. The other component to this is actually warmth. So if you look at some of the best speakers in the world or even entrepreneurs who have a large brand, they're very warm. People like speaking with them and like kind of communicating with them, following them because it's a non-negotiable that they're competent. And at some point, then a lot of the content that they create that helps grow their business is basically, do I like this person? Now, equally, someone can look at your content and look at how you're building your brand and say, that's not for me. That's okay. That's actually totally okay. You almost want that. So, because I think polarization with content and with brand, people look at it as a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, right? So for me, there's just some hard rules that I have, which is like I'm a content first business. I know many people who are like a paid ads first business. We are just the opposite of that. Does that make sense? And that attracts who? People who have the same values as me. So I think if you are looking to do huge things in your business or amplify what you have, there is no disadvantage to basically building a brand that's aligned to who you are based on technical ability and based on your personal values.
Yeah, I think that's, uh, I don't wanna say I was gonna say spot on. I do agree with everything you're saying. I'm still not sure how that translates necessarily to, and not I'm not it's not about disagreeing. I'm still trying to figure out how to apply some of these great kind of insights or guidance that you're offering this council to multifamily marketers, trying to figure out how to differentiate a class A asset in downtown Denver. And what I am maybe pulling out of this, and you tell me if this makes any sense to you, but you're not, I don't think it's realistic, and you might disagree with me that the face of that property, the closest thing you're going to get to it is the property manager, the person that's actually working there day in, day out. What you're not going to get, and you're never going to get, is the owner of that asset trying to build the brand himself or herself. Um, so who is as you say, lean into the rough edges, lean into the quirkiness. That's what people are ultimately going to be attracted to. That opportunity isn't, I'll say, as easy to get at when you're talking about a building where people are going to live. And so, assuming that you really probably shouldn't expect that from a property manager either, is what you could potentially do with this counsel you're offering. Um, think about the actual community as the
100%.
personality. Yeah. Um,
100%.
because I actually, and I do this a lot, Darren, when we have people move to Colorado and join Digible, or when people leave Colorado, still employed at Digible, because this is what just happened with one
Mm.
of our employees. I had coffee with her and she said, "Hey, I just wanted to hook up with you one more time." That sounded bad. "I just wanted to have coffee with you one more time."
I was like,
Um,
ooh.
before, I left, and so we were chatting, and I said, I'm gonna have to ask you this, Noel. How did you go about your process in finding an apartment in Charleston, South Carolina? Did you use ChatGPT? So I just started jumping in, and what quickly came out, and this is how this is all gonna connect, is she said, "Honestly, one of the most important things to me was that I felt like I was finding a apartment that had a tribe, my tribe." And so knowing that that literally was her ultimate driver, like more than price, location, as you said, there's certain non-negotiables, call them competency, call it location, price, pets, the things that we've known for years drive decision making. But what's the tiebreaker? And for her, and I don't think she's alone, it was, do I feel like this is my tribe? And so if you're the marketer of that property, that's gold. It's like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, what was that community like? How would you describe that? And then you really try to build that and lean into that. Does that, sound like sound logic to you?
100%. Let me give you an example. I train in like a kind of a, those kind of like luxury kind of Equinox style gyms. And the gym that I particularly train in is near my house, so I actually train there because of like location. It's near my office. However, the gym is beautiful. It has an amazing recovery area, amazing food, amazing like sauna, but the actual equipment is quite sparse. Now I don't mind this at the end of the world. I remember distinctly a man walked in to do a tour about a month ago, and he said, "Oh, what the hell's going on here? There's not that much equipment." And the woman that was helping the receptionist said, "Oh, we are not like a bodybuilding first gym. We're actually a social wellness club." Now, because of how she phrased it, that allowed her to basically overcome any weaknesses in the gym and said, "Oh, it's more for meeting other people. It's actually more of like an entrepreneur gym. So meeting other entrepreneurs in the gym, as well as having an amazing recovery area." And the guy just turned around and said, "Oh, that makes perfect sense because that's what I'm looking for." Whereas they leaned into their unique edge, and the gym was like very nice, very like well designed. Now, I had the exact same idea for you when you explained about Denver, Colorado. The way that I think about it, the mental model I have is Denver, Colorado is like very nice. Everyone's very like welcoming. It's like cold in the winters. Like there's like a picturesque look of it. If I know that as like an Irish person that's going to move to Denver, and if I was looking to design an apartment complex, I would really lean into that, which is like, hey, like we're welcoming, we're inclusive, we have X, Y, Z, and then maybe that's designed in the decor, number one, and that's also maybe designed in the marketing, which is like you don't need to be in an individual home down the street on your own during winter. You can be in this social environment. And for someone who's in their 20s, I would say, amazing, that's where I want to be. So geography and almost like society and culture is a huge part of brand. If you're able to lean into what's actually happening, whether it's based on geography specifically, or whether it's based on age demographic, that's your moat in your brand. And a lot of people basically look against that, whereas you should actually lean into it. So there's a company right now that's absolutely killing this. It's a company called Cluely. They're a San Francisco startup, basically, and they've really leaned into anti education. The guy actually got expelled from Stanford and Columbia because he created a AI tool that allowed you to cheat on your exams. It basically allowed you to pull every single answer. And they leaned into that because young 20-year-olds don't want to be in college. And now their tool, their platform, Cluely, was valued at like 100 million within the first 4 months because it attracted people of that tribe. And the tool is great, right? It's basically like
Attractive
it's ba-
cheaters, college education.
basically. But not only that, the tool is actually really good. It's like a prompt that we could have right now that could show you a series of questions while you're speaking at presentations, sales calls, and so on. And I just like to think about what's the brand behind it, whether the platform is great, whether the apartment complex is great, what is the brand, and then and basically the vibe that they're trying to create. And 100% you can do that. So as a marketer who sits within a company, that's what you need to try to evoke. I know that to be true because that's what my team also do. Whether I'm leading it as a personal brand or my software company Aura is a sales platform, we're still trying to evoke an emotion, and it's almost like you kind of want to say what's unsaid in the market. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
for us, I give an example. My sales software, it basically tracks like people that are selling high ticket products online. There is an underlying tone that a lot of people who do this online don't know what they're doing. We call that out in our marketing. Hey, you're probably hacking it together. You probably don't know what you're doing. You probably feel overwhelmed. Here is the solution. So why not do that in person? It takes a bit of creativity, right? But 90% of marketing is creative. 10% is doing, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know if all of our listeners would agree with that percentage, but that's probably fair. Um, I think, y this may take us into some book discussion.
Mhm.
Have you heard of Get Naked by Pat Lencioni?
No.
So he hits this point pretty hard. And I don't think it's, kind of complimentary, but I think it's more directly like saying something similar, which is the more vulnerable you become with your brand and in relationships, the more successful you're going to become. Like you'll
Mm,
see growth, you'll see relationships that you never thought were possible before. Um, because we were so suffocated almost by inauthenticity, I guess,
mm,
or disingenuous, like, kind of branding, and marketing, and that, we're not giving people enough credit almost, of what does really drive emotion or evoke emotion, as you said. So, yeah, he's somebody I don't wanna say admire, but I've enjoyed, because he typically does fables, and not everybody,
mm,
but a lot of people know 5 dysfunctions and 6 types of working genius. But he's got like 10 or 12 of these, Darren. I you can tear through them really fast, but they have some really
mhm,
great lessons, and then they're fun. They're almost always startups. So, the first
mm,
few times I read his books, I always was asking, "Is this a real story?" But, he's just, talk about innovative and marketing the 90% versus the 10%. Um, so, I don't know if we should move off the multifamily thread yet or not, but I'm tempted, to go ahead and move into, what our marketing director was excited to hear you and I discuss. So unless you wanna stay a little further, I'm happy to.
let's
Obviously,
go.
it's
I want to hear your critiques about me.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know yet, and I'm comfortable, certainly on this show, throwing all sorts of book references out, but I will say, I might wanna dial back this a little bit because I'm becoming that guy. But I know it's okay with you. I know it's safe.
Yeah.
You had asked and enjoyed some of me and David's, recommendations, and so you came back to me, and I don't remember whether this was a full year ago or not, but it must have been in that time range,
Mm,
and you said, "Hey, I got one for you." Um, I have you heard of Dan Sullivan? And I actually even hadn't heard of him, even though he's had obviously a very successful career, strategic coach. Now I know everything about the
mm,
guy, and I read his other books. But you had said, I think you should check out 10X is easier than 2X. I think it's a really interesting book, has some pretty powerful concepts in it, and I just think you're going to geek out on it. So it didn't take me long. I don't know if it was within the week, but I went ahead and got it on my Kindle and just dove into it. And I think I did tell maybe either David and Olivia, our marketing director, I said, "This is the worst book recommendation I've ever gotten in my life." I don't know. I thought Darren knew me. I thought we were kind of, had some sort of kindred spirit going on, but it's over for me. He's dead to me. And it was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." Like, this is a business book, first of all. Don't you kinda find value and enjoy all of those on some level? And the truth is I don't, but it may seem that way. And then it was like, Yeah, it does seem like you and Darren hit it off naturally and have a lot of the same interests and same perspective. So how could this be? And and now you're hearing it for the first time live on the podcast, like why I had such a hard time with the first half of that book. So that's the important part of the story that we'll get to in a second, because I have this has happened to me a few times with interviews, very rarely, but where I have either the front half of an interview is a train wreck and
Mm,
then it does a 180, or I have a second interview with somebody and it does a 180. But those are so freaking rare, man. And so that's what happened to me with this book. So just to set a little bit quick, explainer here, descriptor. Dan Sullivan's a strategic coach for entrepreneurs. He's been at it for 30 or 40 years. The guy's like 95 years old, and he has a similar body to Darren. He's still built, still still in shape, and he's just like relentless. And he's paired up with Ben Hardy, I think is the guy's name, who's call it a, I don't want to say social scientist, but he's, in that camp or
mm,
genre of these social behavioral, scientists and gurus. So, not totally Simon Sinek and Adam Grant, but whatever, in the same camp. And these two together have written a series of books, now a trilogy. And I don't know if they're going to go for a fourth and a fifth, that are aimed at helping entrepreneurs scale, find success, think differently about how they approach both life and business. And so I'm not gonna spend too much time unless you want, because I actually liked his Gap in the Gain more than
mm,
10x easier than 2x, but both were good books. So the front half of this for me, and this is ironically, I'll just say it, coming from a guy that does judge, but that was one of the things, and I'm just and owning it is I have a hard time myself sometimes not making some strong judgments quickly, which I did
mm,
about this book. Again, the irony is pretty thick here, but I felt that the tone was so judgmental about what you should be aiming for as a business and what success looks like.
mm,
And I
mm,
didn't feel like in most of the books I read, and I don't even know if it's sincere, but a lot of these authors will try to qualify and they're like, look, we acknowledge that success means different things to different people, but it felt like it was very judgmental in the first half of that book, in that success is going to be based on whether you reach these transformational gains, whether you're capable of 10x thinking and 10xing your income, 10xing your business, 10xing your relationships. And I think it puts right away a reader potentially like, could create some anxiety instead of inspiration. And for me,
mm,
I think there's a natural 10x thinker in me, but I was like, man, you're putting a lot of weight on these people of like, if I can't, if I'm unwilling to think in this way, I'm going to live this not meaningless, but kind of more trivial and transactional life. Because he
mm,
really is trying to hit the 2x versus 10x, and he's like, 2x is transactional, it happens all the time, it creates a slog in your life, you just get caught up in it, and you don't really make meaningful gains, and therefore, the what you're capable of achieving is very capped and limited if you stay in that transactional mindset. What you really need to do is be thinking 10x. And here's the method to do that. And this is what will unlock real achievement, real success, greater relationships, love, parenting, etc. I'm like, dude, that is that's a massive position to take. And I think that's kind of a turnoff, or would be for a
mm,
lot of people that may or may not be prepared or comfortable with taking that approach. You're basically saying you're screwed. So
mm.
that's just one. There's a couple other things, but I'll let you chew on that
Yeah,
one.
hold
Tell me
on.
what you that's one
So
of the things that I think was kinda like, kind of effed up, in the first half of the book.
let me offer a reframe, a little bit of a reframe, or reflect on this. So I think a lot of times with books, it's not about understanding or like consuming and implementing absolutely every single component of it. It's like,
Of course not.
what's the one thing that I can take away from this? And to be honest, the way that I think, let's take a step back, just in general, and I'm going to explain it with context in this book, is I try to look at a lot of things through the theory of constraints. So, what's the one main constraint that I need to work on in my business? That's it, specifically the business, that would get me to the next level, or in simpler terms, what's the one constraint that if unsolved will stop me from moving forward? Because there's generally one constraint that will prevent the next constraint from being an issue. That's called the theory of constraints. And the theory of constraints is actually a combination of 10x is easier than 2x. And I looked at 10x easier than 2x, 10x easier than 2x through the lens of what I was doing in the early stages of my business. Because the way I look at it and the way I interpret it is that it's about leverage. And I know leverage is such like a, it's like a woo-woo word at this point. Everyone read like Naval Ravikant's book and thought, oh my God, I need to have like, a tech startup that's going to make $100 million. But I look at it through my experiences. So in the beginning, when we first met, I basically just had a small content agency, which was very penny in, penny out. Like I have to do more to get more back. And that actually caused like a lot of like distress in the business because we grew horizontally extremely aggressively. Whereas through my own like challenges, I had to realize like, okay, it's not about just doing more breadth. There's like obviously like a better way to get more out of it. So for us, it was about working with businesses and actually taking ownership of some of the back end, whereas we would actually help develop products, develop the strategy, develop the funnels, basically help them make more money. And that was my first like, okay, instance here. The second side of it then was about, which I do believe is like fear is an inch deep, mile wide. So a lot of the times, what's preventing you from making that next quantum leap is usually like the top 6 inches. So I was looking at that, being like, okay, where's the next constraint? A lot of it's like fear. We had expanded our business into education. So basically helping a lot of people like yourself who do have teams basically scale. So true consulting effectively. That was a huge, huge unlock lever again, because now it allowed us to have quite literally quantum like leap, which was a one small change. So again, that's another reference from that book effectively. And I I understand your perspective when they talk about the gap and the gain and how like, oh, like your life is going to be miserable if you don't do this. But I guess like that's like how much you latch onto, right? For me, it was more about, okay, what's finding that one unique thing that I can double tap on in my own business. And now that's also true with my software company, right? Whereas I think we have in around 200 clients right now. They will all effectively, in some regard, use our software in some aspect to help them with their sales team. And the irony with that is, if I didn't make those small miniature changes in the past, I wouldn't have the acquisition of clients that I have now. And that was kind of my take on the whole book. To be honest, all other things, I almost didn't even realize those things, if I'm being perfectly honest. Ugh.
Well, what you're, calling out, is what helped me, with, you know, I guess getting comfortable, that may be too strong of a way of describing it, but with, the I'm gonna say vibe, I guess, that I got, from
Mm,
that first half of the book. Like, I needed to get through that somehow, and it was actually, somewhat of what you're describing. Like, those are powerful messages, and they're simple, but they're so true and accurate as far as the constraint theories and, like,
mm,
looking for those small opportunities that can completely unlock you, kind of step function to the next level. And so, the mechanics of what he was describing or how he was, talking through that theory, I think were great. And
mm.
so much so, and this is where you can laugh or point your finger at me, but, that I, uh, launched at 10x is easy. I didn't call it 10x is easier than 2x, but I launched a 10x workshop with the whole company. So we came in,
So I've
so
had a
twice.
big impact with you. That's what I'm hearing. I've had a big impact on you in the end.
It did, it did. And now I use transformational and transactional in too many conversations. And
Mm,
so, yeah, I'm owning it fully. And I did tell the company and anybody that asked me about this, I usually give them the shorter version, but it's just like, yeah, for me, it was a struggle and it was, what felt like a kind of shitty message. Um, and then, when I really spent more time listening to just the mechanics,
mm.
and how impactful that can be, that's when I turned the corner. I still
Can I
stand by,
can I add one thing to it if you don't mind?
yeah, 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 go ahead.
And this is why it was interesting. I was like, I need to think of the first part of the book again because the first part of the book is very like do this otherwise that. It's more like input output. The second half of the book is more like philosophical. Like it's more of like a psychology book. It's more about like how to think about a problem. And it's ironic because I actually had a video on this yesterday. Like, so I've trained at like a quite a high level for basically all my life, and especially the last 10 years, I've been just training bodybuilding at a high level. I have had taken zero supplements. I never take like vitamin tablets, never take XYZ. I just train and I just eat well. And that is like the 10x proponent. It's like all the other stuff. Da, 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 da. It's like I don't need it. And I joke about this a lot, right? And it's the same with the business. It's like for you guys, if you just get good listings, you market them well, you get good results, it creates a flywheel. That's like the only thing that matters. All the other stuff, I know like it matters in the moment, but it's like contextual. And I kind of always think about that, just being like, what's the one thing that for me, the mental model is like, what's the one thing that, if solved, will fix everything else? And taking even a personal example right now, we're trying to do like very important hires, and they're having the next quantum leap for us, right? Trying to get to a like an 8 figure a year business is that's it's again, it's back to who, not what, right? And it's not about doing more for me specifically anymore. Quite literally, like I'm actually doing less, but I'm trying to figure out who's going to do stuff way better than I can. So a lot of this stuff is actually like energetics and philosophy more so than like do this in this way. Um, but I guess like and the reason why I recommend it to you, this is so interesting. The reason why I recommend it to you is because like we had a very honest conversation, and you were like, "Yeah, I have like these goals and everything," and I'm like, "Okay, it's not about doing more though. Like you don't need to create more podcasts. You probably just need to find that one thing that we could just like scale the hell out of, and that's going to give you the quantum leap." And that was like my idea, my like ideology behind it in the beginning.
Yeah, and we haven't yet found that thing, and that's all on me, not you. Um, that's gonna give us, that kind of, I guess, scale or return. But the other part that there's 2 other things I just want you to hear, and for those listening, that, got me about the book. So one was, the conflict, that this theory has, at least it felt that way to me, with, um, James Clear and Atomic Habits. You know,
Mm,
he's all about leaning into the transactional or at least and so I know in the book, they eventually use James Clear and Atomic Habits as an example of 10x, which really fundamentally just kind of crossed me up, and I never really got comfortable with. It's like you're talking about what you just said, constraint theory, and it's not all set up that way. But for those that are interested or still wondering what exactly does 10x is easier than 2x means, it's the at least the idea that instead of looking at all these different options that really create kind of by almost default inertia and 2x like
mm,
thinking and transactional gains, if you really narrow down and think big, you will have much smaller options to evaluate and have a far more likely possibility of getting there. And
mm,
so that I think is totally makes sense. It's a very much to me in the same vein as Bill McEwen is. I don't know if I got that author right, but essentialism is the same, kind
mm,
of thinking.
100%.
Um, but then you have James Clear who's like, "Hey, if each day you just get 1% better," I mean, I'm simplifying this and paraphrasing it, "in your craft, and you just keep stacking those, you get this compounded effect that will lead to transformational change or gain." And
Mm,
I felt like he was trying to find a way to make that work because he actually used it in the book, and I think that is completely, those are not at odds, but, that his approach or formula is and it's okay, but it's like,
mm,
that is not Atomic Habits. And so
mm,
the last part of this, and I'll let you comment on this too, is I felt like he pirated, and yeah, I'm gonna use that word, from a lot of other books and stitched together, what, he presented as like this very unique formula. It's like, but I at least appreciate that it was there was lots of attribution. I was like, "Is
mm,
anybody else picking this up?" He's referencing all these books, including, Atomic Habits. He did mention Essentialism. He did mention Jim Collins. He did mention Adam Grant. He mentioned, like, all these people that I've read, that you've read, and then, it seemed like tried to piece it together and put his name on it. And, I still think the 10x is easier than 2x is a great way to, as you're talking framing, like frame it, but I, can't help and nobody has an original thought, so I
yeah.
respect people,
That's a good point.
it's Yeah, it's like fair, like, but it was too much for me. I was like, you kind of cheated your way to this,
Mm,
revolutionary concept. It's like you really like this is yeah, you just patching things together. It still
mm,
doesn't change the fact that I'd recommend that book now, believe it or not. And that I think there is some really valuable, again, mechanics or formulas, but just understand that he's borrowing from a lot of other authors.
mm. Well, one thing I'd add to this, which is quite interesting, is the James Clear effect of, like, 1% improvements every day. That means that that implies that you actually improve. Let me explain. A lot of times, like, I've observed, a lot of people can do things, but they don't actually get better. This is why, like, madness is defined as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I've seen that. A lot of the people that I've even worked with, they do the same thing without making adjustments. If we are making those micro improvements, yes. However, I think you mentioned a very important word, which was craft. Craft implies that this is the thing that you want to devote your life to, which is kind of like what I've done, what you've done with your business, and like you're a master of what you do. But I imagine there's a lot of things you do around the house, picking up some things around the house that you're terrible at. You just do the same thing over and over again. Same with me. Right? I'm terrible at loads of things. So it implies that you're like going to commit yourself to one specific thing. Now, again, right, it can be a series of things, whether it could be your fitness, it could be your relationship, it could be your business, but it implies like rootless iterations. So if you look at a book called, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, actually the first ever book that I ever wrote, this implies exact same theory. You have a hypothesis, you go to the market, you get slapped in your face, you speak to 1,000 people, you have to make the changes. Man, how many people have never made those changes? How many startups are great but never make adjustments? Why? Because of like a lack of skill, lack of adaptation, and ego, all these different things. Whereas I'm not trying to be
Here.
right.
Yep. Mhm.
I'm trying to get it right. I don't want to be right. I want to try to get it right. It's a huge distinction. And they're like the micro adjustments. Of course, it's always nuanced. But yeah, dude, I I appreciate it. That's always a plan, right? It's just to go back and forth on these things.
Yeah. Well, I am curious if you were writing a book, and maybe you are, and you can break it on this podcast.
Hmm.
But if you're not, with all that you've consumed, and where you're at, I guess, in your career, your life,
Mm.
business, etc., what would the topic be? What would you feel most motivated to express to your network?
So it's funny because I had actually started writing a book and then I put it down and I said I'm going to sell a company first and then write a book. That was actually my exact approach. I was like, if I'm going to have a lot more leverage, 10x
Same.
approach. So the first idea, and I had written quite a bit of it, was called authority. So how to build authority for someone that doesn't have a large audience. So like the psychology of it, like the nuance of it, the edge of it, your personal components, and then basically what you actually say and do. So whether that's for some building authority online. But secondly, now like our model that we teach is called like the ecosystem. So basically, it's about how to create an environment whereby people come into your world and your free stuff is better than everyone else's paid stuff. And then your actual marketing and content is so dialed into what you serve people with that the next natural step is to go work with you from there. So it's a combination of the offer, product, service you have, the content system, the marketing you have, and the sales system that you have, the sales team you have, that makes this an ecosystem versus like a traditional funnel that you'd see with like paid ads or with organic content. So I know this to be true because it's what we did for ourselves, plus, 600 other people in the past 5 years. And that's actually the angle that I want to take. But again, I want more receipts, more results, so that this becomes more powerful, more evidence, more anecdotal, more actual data, and more evidence data to be able to relay back like, oh, okay, this hits it in this way.
I love that. I think the only danger I'd tell you, of waiting for more receipts, more evidence is, how fast things are changing, and some, philosophies, and in your case, the way you're presenting an ecosystem may not change for decades, and maybe it will change in 6 months. That's always the risk, though, when you're trying to build up more and more evidence to support your position. The world, says, "Okay, we're turning again."